in that circumstance, they wouldn't earn any of the credit. But, you know, if they were able to turn around their business, then they would again go above the baseline income tax revenue and still be able to earn the credit going forward on that. So the assumptions for this: a company had 100 full-time equivalents at the project site at the time of approval, $2.9 million in payroll. They proposed to create 225 new full-time equivalents at $6.5 million in payroll. It's a good jump for a company of that size. The wages would be $14 an hour. The payroll growth over the past 3 years is 7.5%. So unlike the previous example that grew at 38%, this one, they're going along and they're trying to find new business. They're trying to get in. They say they get a contract. Great. They come to us and they say we're going to create 225 jobs, and then that's what you get from the big jump. The BITR is still computed the same, but one important thing, as we mentioned in the first slide, say it just for hypotheticals, it lost its contract and started laying off employees at a rapid pace, dipping below its baseline in year 4, but then secured a new contract again in year 5. And you can see from the representation, for us, as long as they don't dip below their original baseline payroll plus 660, they're still eligible to remain in the program. So we would still keep them in the program, even if they go below BITR. It's just they wouldn't be able to earn any credits. And under that case, too, we may look at have some discussions with them about reducing the rate of term or some type of non-compliance actions going along with that. But again, just with the program now, it's very important for companies in the program to communicate with us to let us know what's going on. If business conditions are changing or expected to change, let us know. We want to be flexible. We want to be business-friendly companies.
Since we're talking about an example where we've got layoffs, I think this is another point, a good point to bring up another point about the new program. In the past, the department has had a policy of sort of looking at what was a company's high water mark over the last year in terms of the number of employees. You'll notice that on the assumptions on this, and all three scenarios Chad's going to show, he said the number of full-time employees at the date that the project is approved by the Tax Credit Authority. We are no longer doing this look back in terms of the number of employees. What we are doing is a look back for 1 year in terms of what their payroll and what their income tax revenue has been. So if you have an example where a company did a layoff in December of in December of 08, let's say they went in and did a layoff, we would take a look at, again, as I said earlier, their payroll from October 1, 08 through September 30 of 09. That's going to have a blending of their employment levels. It's going to have a natural averaging by using that statistic as the base. So if you're talking to a company that has had a reduction in force over the last year, do not assume that they are not eligible for this program. If they are making a capital investment that's going to create jobs in the state, don't assume that. Talk to our Regional Economic Development Director, talk to one of our folks out of Columbus, and talk through the situation. Ask them for their payroll numbers. So what are your payroll numbers? What are your payroll numbers going to be if you make this investment in Ohio and you grow these jobs? Because that's going to ultimately be the key factor. Don't just simply exclude them because they've had a layoff in the last year. A lot of companies have had layoffs in the last year. And we don't want to exclude companies that are already here in Ohio and are trying to turn themselves around. But we also need to sort of make sure that we're not incentivizing seasonal companies that, lay off a bunch of people every January and then come back and ramp up, and, they've got a heavy Christmas business or whatever, and they're looking for incentives for what they're going to hire every December anyway. That's why we're focusing on this overall annual payroll growth.
Thanks, Steve. I think that's a great way to look at it. One of the easiest ways that helps me is under the old program, you look back 1 year and what were the jobs a year ago, but that's basically a snapshot of what happened a year ago. But with the income tax revenue or the payroll growth or the payroll over the past year, it's going to take into account that aggregate amount. So if there's some fluctuations, there's some layoff, that'll reduce the amount. The only adverse time that this would really impact a company is if, say, they went for 11 months full bore and they laid off a bunch of people in the period of 1 month, and then in that same month they came back to us to apply for a tax credit, and maybe their intention was to hire those same people back. Well, that was the reason the one-year look-back policy was instituted in the first place a long time ago, is to formulate a baseline. Because under no circumstances would we want to look at the program to have people intentionally lay off employees to then rehire them back and count them as new. So that would take that into account again, and that probably shouldn't be looking for a tax credit under those circumstances anyways. But the point is, I think it's a much more flexible approach. It's much easier for a company to conceptualize, and we're no longer looking at a one-year snapshot of what they were a year ago and trying not to take those other things into consideration. So that's the scenario 2, single contract dependent. This last scenario, we're looking at 2-year company steady growth. Under this circumstance, there's been a large ramp up in the beginning, and quite frankly, we would like to think that, or we would hope that we would have been able to meet the company a few years earlier and help them capture that growth, but we're just putting this in there for hypotheticals, that they came to us as they've already experienced substantial growth, but then they're going to maybe put in a new line or something smaller and hire just a small amount of employees, but then kind of level off on that. Well, they'd still be eligible for the credit if they meet the basic criteria. Unfortunately, they wouldn't be able to capture that substantial growth in the beginning, but we just use this as a scenario to show that, different companies in different stages of growth would still be able to qualify. So if we go through the assumptions on this, they had 120 full-time approvals at the project site at the time of approval. They're proposing to create 35 full-time equivalents, $1.6 million in annual payroll. The wages will be $22 an hour. Good wages. They were 50% payroll growth in their first 2-year period. The ITRs computed the same, and they reached their commitments in year 3 and then remained steady. So again, although the credits may not be as great as the previous ones, that's because the numbers hired at the time of approval were less, and we can't go back and look prior to approval. And as I said, we would like to be able to capture this one earlier, but we still want to say that companies such as this would still qualify for credit.
The other way to think about this one is to think about it as a company that doesn't have 120 employees when they come to us, but they have 12. You're going to see a company that's got a lot of sort of annual growth, and then they're looking to take the company to the next level. This is kind of how this would play out with those sort of companies as well.
Exactly. Good point. Thanks, Steve. Those are the scenarios for the job creation tax credit, job retention tax credit. Are there any questions before we move on to the next section?
We've got you so completely confused that you don't even know what to ask. It is W-2 payroll. It's what they report as, what is it? If this was April 14th, I could tell you what box it is on the taxes, because that's generally when I end up doing my taxes. But box 14 or whatever it is on your W-2s, it's that Ohio payroll.
But payroll at the project side?
Yes.
So if you looked at a large company that had payroll throughout Ohio, it wouldn't be all payroll, it would just be payroll at the project site.
And I'm sorry, Gene's question was whether payroll included benefits or not.
I've got a company, a manufacturing company that's been around for a long time, injection molding, and they want to buy $2.5 million in new equipment and hire 65 new people. They don't pay their employees $10.88 when they come in. What do we do in the state of Ohio with those situations?
The question is, what do you do when you've got a company that's looking to bring on employees and they bring them on at a level less than our 1088 an hour threshold? And I want to come back and talk about the threshold because there was a nuance there that we didn't discuss. A couple things. First of all, they're required to hit that threshold 3 years after they start the project. So it's not what is your starting wage, but what is your average wage after 3 years, number one. Number two, at some level, this program is intended to raise the overall average wage in the state of Ohio, and if you're paying $22,000 a year, that's well below the Ohio median per capita income. That's not doing that. In our rules and guidelines that we're going to put out on this program, Chad had on here that we were raising the threshold to 175% of federal minimum wage, except where a county's unemployment rate is above 7%. 7%. That's correct. 7%. Look, we recognize that in the midst of a recession, it's not